Hey everyone, welcome back to the Bucket Think Tank. So, I've been trying to come up with a video to get people interested in the Doctor Who audio plays, primarily because I asked some people in a Doctor Who group what I should do, and they said, well, let's do an introduction to Big Finish. So, as a quick little tidbit, Big Finish is a privately owned company granted license by the BBC to use the Doctor, the Daleks, the Cybermen, specific Doctors. I want to say it was last year they got the actual permission from the BBC to use the 10th Doctor in their audios. And we're still waiting for Matt Smith to join in. He said he's interested. He's waiting for the phone call. And we still have no idea if Eccleston's going to do it because that's the kind of person Eccleston is. But whatever. The real strength of Big Finish, I feel, is in the fact that they take classic era Doctors and still keep their stories going. There's a certain sadness to the idea of Doctor Who as a series still going, because you know that no matter what you do with the Fifth Doctor, he's still going to the caves of Androzani. The Seventh Doctor is still going to get out of his TARDIS and in New York City and be shot dead. Well, shot, taken to the hospital, and then he'll regenerate. But certain things aren't going to change, but we're getting a lot more adventures. We're getting more stuff to do. And that's sort of the real strength of Doctor Who, is that what we see on TV is not necessarily all there was to it. So what I wanted to do here was, because I've dropped a couple of schmeckles into Big Finish, and not all of them have been great. There's been some flops for me. What I wanted to do was sort of put out a list going through my collection of audio plays and just come up with some that I think are really good. Now, to be fair, I'm only going to come up with about 9. And maybe 10. Haven't quite decided yet, even as I'm doing this video. I have no idea. But I've only listened to one audio from the 10th Doctor, and I'm not sure if that's enough, but I think we're all very confident. Look, if you like the 10th Doctor, and you like the idea of him going on adventures with Rose Tyler, before Army of Ghosts comes in. If you like the idea of the 10th Doctor teaming up with Donna again, before Turn Left, which is actually the beginning of the end for Donna, then I just say do it. But I can't in good conscience say, hey, I've heard one of these audios, and I think this run's a good idea. It more than likely is. I mean, hearing the interviews, David Tennant and Catherine Tate and Billie Piper, they're all really excited. There's some good stories. I've heard good things. And as a matter of fact, to be fair, a YouTuber by the name of Stu Bagful, or Stu Bag, his original name was Stuart Hardy. He did a review of the 10th Doctor and Donna, so I would defer you to him. And he also did a best Big Finish for Beginners list, but I'm gonna do my own on it, and hopefully it'll at least be as good as that. But if you are already well versed in Big Finish, I would still recommend you go to Stu Bag's channel, because he also does a retrospective on the 8th Doctor audios, which is really good, and he also did the Diary of a River Song, which I still haven't heard yet. So coming up on your first one that I would recommend is the Marion Conspiracy. I suggest the Marion Conspiracy because it is a totally fresh start for the 6th Doctor, not a reboot, but there's no companion, there's no history coming into this audio. It's just the 6th Doctor arrives at a university where he meets a history teacher named Evelyn Smythe, and he's tracking a nexus point that's connected to her, that she has to be the nexus point. Something is going wrong in her personal history, so they go back to the time of Queen Elizabeth I, but end up in the time of Queen Mary, in the middle of the heresy laws put in by Queen Mary, and it sort of becomes this really fun story about us understanding Queen Mary. And the reason I think that works is because that's what a pure historical should be. It's not what it always is. I think a pure historical should just sort of be, hey, this is this character in history, let's understand him a bit more. And Evelyn comes in with her own prejudices and biases against Mary, because she's studied history. That's her area of expertise, this particular time period in history. And the Doctor is sort of questioning his own issue of whether or not he's a good person. This was something that the 12th Doctor brought up to Clara in season 8. Clara, am I a good man? And the Doctor here sort of poses the question a bit of a deeper level. If I do something and it causes people to die, it causes people to go to war, or causes people to lose their faith or reason, And if I do all that but still believe in my hearts that it was a good thing to do, am I still a good person? Because with that same logic, Queen Mary, who's being fleshed out as a much more complex person, is also doing what she believes to be right, and it's going to lead to people dying. Is she still a good person? It's a really great story and a really great lesson, I think, about history. And that's something Evelyn starts to learn, is that history and the people involved are not as cut and dry as it looks in the books. It's a really great story, and I love the names. George Crow and William Leaf. And it's just great names, especially when someone says, "Good one, George Crow." Love it, love it. Next is Storm Warning. Storm Warning is an Eighth Doctor audio, and I recommend that if you get into Big Finish, you should probably just start with the Eighth Doctor, just because he has a pretty straightforward run. Because he never got one on TV, because he had the TV movie, which didn't work so well. It was supposed to reinvigorate the series. It didn't do that because it was a terrible movie. And the Doctor's half-human should never, ever be brought up again. Burn the idea down, bury it, shoot it out back, in that order. But this story here sort of takes place, I would say, like 5 minutes after that. The Doctor's in the TARDIS, and he finds himself on board an airship called the R-101, where he meets a stowaway named Charlotte Pollard. And the Doctor knows exactly what's going to happen to the R-101. It's going to crash. No one's going to survive. But as he's trying to sort of get away, there's a Voidosaur, which is a flying space pterodactyl, which crashes in, and through that, the Doctor and Charlotte, find an alien on board. And the story sort of expands from there. And in this story, we sort of get an understanding of the web of time. So the web of time is sort of the continuity of the universe. Picture it as a comic book universe. So take all of DC Comics, let's say up to current reboot event. Let's just call it what it is. We have that continuity, and certain things have to happen. So within the web, there are the fixed points within the web. And if you mess with the web, there could be some problems. If you change a fixed point, there could be some problems. And that's sort of how the story goes forward, because the Doctor ends up saving Charlie from the R-101. And honestly, this story feels a bit like the episode Rose. It's a very straightforward episode. It's very interesting. Charlie is a really great companion. She's like a happy marriage between classic and new Who companions, and I think she's a lot better than Rose Tyler. Please don't shoot me for that, but I'll stand by it even as you do shoot me. I think Charlie's better than Rose, and they even kind of go down similar roads. Next up is Spare Parts. Now, most people always recommend Spare Parts because it's a really good story. It's like Genesis of the Cybermen, and it's just really good. But I took an issue with it because it required you to know a bit more about classic Who. Not a lot, but if you're not familiar with the story Earthshock or most of classic Who, some of it may just go over you, especially the introduction of Nyssa. Not the introduction, but the fact that Nyssa of Tracken's there. She's the Fifth Doctor's companion, and the other two I suggested, there's no history that you have to know going in other than, do you know who the Doctor is? You know what the TARDIS is? Yeah, you're in. But here, the Doctor and Nyssa end up on Mondas, and the Cybermen haven't quite happened yet. But we are seeing people getting their limbs replaced, harvesting organs for money, and getting like prosthetics and artificial hearts and lungs. And you get the feeling that the Cybermen are right around the corner, and you're not sure exactly what the Doctor's going to do. And neither does he, and that sort of really helps sell it. The two aspects that really carry this story are the Doctor and Nyssa, which would, I guess, make sense. But hear me out. This all takes place after the events of Earthshock, not directly after the events, because we have to presume that the Fifth Doctor's other companion, Tegan, has finally gotten home, or wherever. Tegan's not there. And it's clear that the death of Adric at the hands of the Cybermen are still weighing on him, but he doesn't know quite what he's going to do. He knows he can't stop the Cybermen from being created. Well, he can't actually do it. But he may be able to guide them, to get the people to realize, hey, this isn't what we want, as opposed to just, tearing down the cyber factory. And the other half is Nyssa meeting Yvonne and her family, because they're such great characters, and they do a great job of reflecting the society they live in, just these three people sell exactly what's going on this planet, because they each bring a different perspective to it. We have Yvonne's just trying to do the best she can, her brother who wants to do something more, and her dad is just trying to hold everyone together. It's like he's more aware of what's going on than I think he lets on. But it's a really solid story, and it's a bit frightening too, because we see the Cybermen coming more and more of an idea, more of a possibility, and it goes back to the idea that Cybermen aren't there to hurt you. They aren't trying to kill you. They're trying to save you. Like, the planet's getting colder. You won't survive as you are now, because remember, we're drifting away from the sun. So undergoing the conversion is the best thing for you, and that's what makes it scary. And going on to the conversion, again, we can't see it, we can only hear it, but it feels a bit like what we saw in Russell's era, when the Army of Ghosts and Armageddon story. Next up is Davros. So, Davros is a character that we all know in Doctor Who. If you're a classic Who fan, if you're a new Who fan, you've seen Davros at least once. You've seen a story with him at least once. You're wondering, why is this man in a really robotic chair? If you saw The Magician's Apprentice, why doesn't he have any legs? It's just weird. But we know he's the creator of the Daleks. And going just on the show, that's kind of all you know. And this story here is part of a villain series that Big Finish did, which would star a companionless Doctor as he interacts with one of his villains. And the story is also designed to flesh out those villains. And Davros needed it. I think he needed it a bit more than anyone else in the villain series. This story runs on the premise that a businessman, very wealthy businessman, tries to find and awaken Davros to get him to work for his company, while his wife wants to write the definitive biography on Davros. And it ends up with the Doctor saying, look, we can't trust Davros. He's evil. And it's like, no, you've just been taught to believe he's evil. Davros is just a genius. He's a hero. And it ends up with the Doctor working with Davros at the company to just sort of keep an eye on him. And it's a really fun story, primarily because we get the origin of Davros, how Davros came to be who he is. And he sort of feels like Magneto in some ways here. It's sort of the idea that you understand how Davros became who he is, but you also think that doesn't really explain or justify what you've done. And maybe the best thing for you would be if you never survived that war. It's a really fun story. I never thought I'd care about Davros. Just never thought I would. And this story makes you do it. Number 5 is a 7th Doctor audio, and I wasn't entirely sure what the 7th Doctor audio would be, because while he's my favorite Doctor, he never really has gotten the best of stories from Big Finish. I think he's sort of been possibly the weak link. Not because of his character, but possibly just because of the direction. Maybe I just haven't found the right one. But to date, the best one still has to be Live 34. Live 34 is life. I'm sorry if you disagree, because you're wrong. But Live 34 it sums up the 7th Doctor perfectly, I think. He does very little, but accomplishes such amazing results. And the story here is just the 7th Doctor and his companions overthrow a corrupt government, uses the media that the government's controlling. It's really great because this whole story is told primarily through news reports. We're seeing, like, I'm Wyan Waring here, and I'm going to meet this person here. And they just sort of hear from the Doctor or his companions exactly what's going on, as the Doctor and his companions uncover more and more about the secrets going on in Colony 34. It's a really, really great story. I think the end's a bit weak. It just sort of wraps itself up a bit too well. But I think it's a really great story to get you into maybe not the 7th Doctor's era, but who the 7th Doctor is. We also get an introduction to his new companion, Hex. This isn't his primary introduction, but it's just nice to see the 7th Doctor with somebody. He spent most of the time with Mel and Ace, and Mel went away, I think, pretty quick. So, coming up next is TheSettling. TheSettling is another pure historical. This time it's the 7th Doctor and Ace taking Hex to Ireland in 1649 in Drahuda. I'm not sure if I pronounced that right. And despite the Doctor's warnings, both Ace and Hex get involved in the fighting, and they end up crossing paths with Oliver Cromwell. And like the Marion Conspiracy, what really sells this is the interactions with our main historical figure, in this case, Oliver Cromwell. And you learn a bit about Cromwell. You learn that he's trying to do the right thing, that, he's trying to cause as little damage as possible, but he's still his own worst enemy. And it's also Hex's story, pretty much. The Marion Conspiracy was just sort of, Evelyn was sort of the introduction to it. Introduction to Queen Mary, who Evelyn does interact with, the Doctor does. And here it's Hex, Ace, and the Doctor interacting with Cromwell. But it's primarily Hex's story. And I think what I really like about this is that this story is being told after the fact. It starts off with Ace and Hex in the TARDIS. And it ends with them looking at the Doctor and says, "From now on, we'll do what you tell us." And he just says, like, "I almost wish that were true." Number 7 is Trial of the Valeyard. So, Trial of the Valeyard, I'm putting this here as more of a treat for classic Doctor fans, because if you heard of the story Trial of a Time Lord, you kind of know what to expect here. The Valeyard, a dark version of the Doctor who arises somewhere between his 12th and final incarnation, so we should have seen him, well, at some point. It's weird. But he's on trial for quote-unquote crimes contrary to the laws of Gallifrey, whatever that means, and he has chosen for his brief the Sixth Doctor. With the knowledge of his crime unknown to the jury or even the Doctor must find a way to defend the Valeyard and also figure out exactly who the Valeyard is. And he kind of explains it, and it also goes a bit more into the secrets of Gallifrey and the concepts of regeneration and whether or not everything we know about it is true. And this is a really great idea for Doctor Who, that to take certain ideas and make us question them. Not totally, retcon them, but say like, well, what if it wasn't true that you can only regenerate a certain number of times? What if that was an imposed limit told to us by Rassilon? And this isn't the idea that you need a new regeneration cycle, but that you could just keep going. Why doesn't anyone try that? And we find out why and a bit more of the secrets through the Valeyard. It's a fun story, but I think what really sells it for me is the beginning. The opening speech from the Sixth Doctor, because the Sixth Doctor has to be the most principled and pragmatic Doctor, but he's also possibly the Doctor the most in love with himself. I love the Sixth Doctor's ego. Coming up next is a relatively pricey one. Classic Doctor's New Monsters. Now, this isn't a solo story, but it is actually 4 stories featuring a classic Doctor without a companion and a monster that we had only ever seen in New Who. So we've got the 5th Doctor with Michelangelo and the Weeping Angels, the 6th Doctor defending a Jadoon in Victorian court on Mars, the 7th Doctor and the Sycorax in a time where Earth has a drug for every mood and feeling, and the 8th Doctor with a disgraced Sontaran during the Time War. They're all such interesting stories that I would have recommended them at first, except that the first 6 were much easier to balance on your budget, and you can probably find them possibly on Spotify. I didn't hear that from me, but this one's like $20. I figured this is for the people that just want to dive in, sell me a good idea, and I'll just buy it, and come hell or high water, I'll accept it. But it's just really fun. Volume 2 I didn't feel was as good. I think the Vashanarada stories with the 4th Doctor and Vashanarada and the 8th Doctor and the Vashanarada were where the real meat of that volume really lied. I felt the other 2 just weren't that great, comparatively speaking. Next up is The War Doctor. So it was a bit weird, really, when Day of the Doctor came out, or rather, Name of the Doctor, and we found that there was a secret incarnation of the Doctor that the Doctor hid from himself. Like, it wasn't his name that was his greatest secret. It was his role in the Time War, and the fact that he destroyed Gallifrey. Quote-unquote, destroyed Gallifrey. So, I think a big question I think we all had was, what really led to the Doctor being the one to say, okay, it's gone too far, no more, I have to destroy my own planet. It's a radical idea, and I'm not sure if this series actually explains that. I'm only one volume in, and I didn't quite know what to expect, but I knew once, I knew I really wanted to hear it, but then I heard John Hurt passed away, and I thought, you know what, I have to listen to this, and this first volume is amazing. Not gonna lie. Not even trying to overhype it, it's just really good. We still don't know exactly what the Time War details. We get the constant phrase, all of time and space is burning, the whole of creation's at stake, the Nevermore's a nightmare child, as the 10th Doctor said. So this one, at least from where I saw, it didn't really explain what those were, but we are seeing exactly the state of the War Doctor and Gallifrey. And primarily the fact that there's a secret group within Gallifrey, a secret group of Time Lords that are trying to make peace with the Daleks in the middle of the Time War. And the idea that the Doctor, who would always be the one that says, well, let's find a peace, he finds this idea totally ridiculous and impossible because they're the Daleks. So, next up, and this is a relatively new one, the War Master. So, honestly, I think my favorite Master out of all the ones that appeared on television would be the Derek Jacobi one. And he didn't even do anything, but where John Sim and Missy's take on the Master are just crazy, this one felt like classically evil. I miss classically evil villains. I'm getting a bit bored of the ones that are just crazy because they're crazy and like crazy evil. I kill puppies and whatnot. No. This one here has a set goal and a set direction. And I love it because this one here is the Master in the Time War. And I don't want to go too deep in this one because I feel that I'm still having trouble exactly understanding everything that's going on with it. I thought it was a bit of a slow burn at first. This is, again, another expensive one, but the last two stories were really, really good. There's a story of the Master pretending to be the Doctor. There's a story of the Master pretending to be this really good scientist. There's one where the Master just is like, you know what? I'm going to grow some grapes to make some wine, while this guy tries to save a planet from the Time War. Stupid fool. But you know what? I'm making wine. It's just hilariously fun and amazing, and the Sky Man, to me, was a good enough reason to get this audio. It's good. It's worth the $20 just for that story, but again, this is more for people who are willing to shell out that $20. You'd be just as fine getting the Marion Conspiracy, Storm Warning, Spare Parts, Davros, Live 34, TheSettling. You'd be totally fine with just those, or go on Spotify. You didn't hear that from me. Type in Big Finish Doctor Who and see what you get. For the bonus reel, if there was one other story I would actually recommend three. They're still pretty pricey, which would be the Master Trilogy. And that's And You Will Obey Me, the Vampire of the Mind, and the Two Masters. This is a three-part story involving Doctors 5, 6, and 7 meeting the Master. And the Master's doing something different each time. So there's the Master that looks all skeleton-y and creepy. There's the new Master, McQueen. I love McQueen's take on the Master. He's just so fun and classy. Love it. And then there's the Two Masters, which is both of them. And what makes this work is that each time the Master always feels that he knows a bit more than the Doctor. He's always a couple steps ahead of him, as the Doctor, as far as he knows, these are all isolated incidents until we get to the Two Masters. And the twist there is really great. The Doctor Falls tried to sort of hit that same beat. I'm not sure if this trilogy was what they had in mind, but this story, The Two Masters, I think is much better than that. The Doctor Falls is not better for the Master. It's better because it's the Doctor versus the planet of Cybermen. And the Master's there. That's kind of it. But with that in mind, we're going to bring this video to a close. If you're a fan of Big Finish and you have audios that you think would be really good for newcomers to listen to, or if you've got something you'd like to say about the list I've got, please leave it in the comment section, and I will catch you all later. This is the Bucket Think Tank signing out. May your fandom serve you well.